Is this your king? Professor James Small edition. Yep, what's going on, party people in the place to be? I go by the name of the BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city, Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's popping? Happy Wednesday to everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. And of course, we want to say what's up to Nate 2D2 on the chat, the incomparable, the indelible one. Um, please, uh, somebody, share the link. Tell a friend to tell a friend that's him again. And if you like how it goes down at the BK Apologist, you can show your support and love via PayPal. And if you'd like to be a monthly supporter of the BK, you can become a patron where you get an assortment of goodies to enhance your personal Bible study. And I see people are coming in now. We got Madeo,
Come
we got
on in.
Born Again Rome in the building. We got the real American Mr. Phil Fox. You know what I mean? We got Enid Parasad. I don't know if I'm saying it wrong. I'm sure I butchered it. Please forgive me. Um, yeah, guys, definitely, please, 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 if you have not yet already, like, share, and subscribe. Please share the link. And of course, I am with my trusty partner, the man, the myth, the legend, MJ Jackson. What's going on?
Not quite a myth, not quite a legend like yourself, but just
Oh,
happy to be continuing this series where we take out these pseudo kings. Just very happy.
yeah.
It gives me great joy to choose violence.
As always. So if you're not sure what Mr. Jackson's alluding to, we've been doing a series entitled "Is This Your King?" Of course, we're familiar with that phrase if you saw the first Black Panther movie with Killmonger. And what we decided to do, as you know, a lot of what we do here at the platform, we deal with a lot of the claims and critiques from the conscious community. So what we decided to do is like, you know what? Let's go to their OGs. Let's go to their master teachers. Because a lot of stuff that you're hearing, whether it's on Twitter or on TikTok, a lot of information has been disseminated for the last 20 to 30 years from a specific group of individuals. So we say, you know what? Let's strike the head and the body falls, right? So and that's what we've been doing. So we've been commenting on the works of Phil Valentine, Dr. Ben, um, and today we will be dealing with Dr. Professor James Smalls.
Please don't call him a doctor.
so before we get into it, what are some of your preliminary thoughts on the Mr. Smalls?
Well, Professor Smalls is a legitimate professor, but I've been wanting to, you know, take a look at some of his stuff in depth live, perhaps because he is revered as a very reasonable and sensible guy within that community. I think you and Adam Coleman, the one time y'all did address him on your channel, he
Yeah,
was having a conversation with Zion
and
Lex. Now
Lex.
him and Zion Lex had a falling out a few years back, which
Right,
was just because Zion Lex kind of asked him a few questions, and I don't think that he took too kindly to that. And here's my whole thing: within our community, within the Christian community, questions are welcomed. Now, I might not be able to answer all of your questions, but I can point you to somebody who probably can, you know. So there's no reason for us to construct an epistemological edifice where the quote unquote elders are off, or are off bounds,
Right.
or
Off limits. Right.
off limits. So it, within our community, we welcome inquiry. There's nothing to hide. The God that we serve and the revelation that He's given can stand up to any test.
Right. So for those who are not familiar with Mr. Smalls, let me just give you a quick summary here. Professor James Small is a scholar, activist, dynamic speaker, organizational consultant. He is also CEO of Sanaa Lodge Enterprise, Ghana Limited, CEO and president of the African American Management Company, Ghana Limited, international vice president, Organization of Afro-American Unity, priest of O.A.A.U, Babalorisha, Ifa Tradition, and past president of the Eastern region of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization. All right, so just to get a little tidbit of what we're working here. So, a lot of titles, he wears a lot of hats. He's somebody who is definitely well respected in the community, and like MJ said, comes across as one of the more level-headed individuals that you'll find in the conscious community until he starts critiquing the Bible and Christianity. Then, for some reason, it kind of goes off the rails just a tad bit. All right. So, an example of that is what we're gonna hear right now. So, MJ, if you can.
All right, hold on to your butts.
Stupid.
Okay. Now, what was the religion?
Africans never had any religion till we met the white man and the mixed breed man.
Go back a little.
Hmm. Go ahead.
Okay, it was a little garbled at first. Go back at the 10:30. Yeah, that's good.
Some people say the 12, but they can't prove that either, but we'll settle for that.
Okay. Now, what was the religion of the Twa?
Africans never had any religion till we met the white man and the mixed breed man.
Hmm. Go ahead. Teach.
So we
Talk
we
to
just
us.
had a way of life that we lived every day, had nothing to do with any religion. We got involved with these other people and we wanted to imitate them. And that's what we're doing now. We want to go, but yeah, we'll go study the ancestors, but then we try to twist that shit to look just like Christianity. We got beads on, but we praying to God. The
All right, you
Africans
stop
wouldn't
there.
pray to no God like that.
So, Larry, the video we're yeah, we're live, but we're playing a video that was already recorded. So, so he says, so another asked him, what religion did Africa have? And he said, did he have any religion until they met the half breeds and white people, right? Africa had no religion. They just had a way of life, right? Okay. So, with that being said, let me move this here. We're gonna look at this book here, African Religions: A Very Short Introduction by Jacob K. Olupona. And this is what he says. Africans were pronounced incapable of producing meaningful, sophisticated religious traditions and were said to lack, quote, true knowledge of a supreme God. If anything showed a level of sophistication that would seem contrary to such beliefs, then it was proposed that African civilizations and religious belief systems must have originated elsewhere and been transported to the African continent. Such views were called diffusionists, held that cultures in West and West Central Africa had gradually, quote, trickled down into the continent in degraded form, naturally, from the great Mediterranean centers of civilization. Thus, early scholarship on Africa and African religions reflected a pernicious racism, which rendered impossible the kinds of sensitivity to human spirituality that would lead to a genuine appreciation of Africa's profound and inspiring religious culture. Remember what Professor Small said. Oh, There was no religion until the white man and the half breed came, right? Well, funny enough, the racists say the same thing. The racists say the same thing. Let's look at it again, right? That it was proposed that African civilizations and religious belief systems must have originated elsewhere, right? That it, if it's sophisticated, it couldn't be from Africa. So I find it interesting that Professor Smalls is kind of, echoing this sentiment, this pernicious racism, you know. So let's keep reading here. African religions are as diverse as the African continent itself. Africa is home to more than 50 countries, nearly every form of ecological niche found on Earth, and hundreds of ethnic groups who together speak more than 1,000 languages. It is not surprising, then, that this enormous range of peoples, cultures, and modes of living would also be reflected in a diverse range of religious expressions. Religious worldviews, often unique to distinct ethnic groups, reflect people's identities and lie at the heart of how they relate to one another, to other people, and to the world at large. These religious worldviews encode, as well as influence, ethical practices, taboos, and the knowledge particular to each group. The integration of religion into all aspects of daily life poses a sharp contrast to the church state dichotomy upheld in Euro American societies. African religious worldviews permeate economics and politics on a continent where the sacred and secular realms influence one another. In fact, the use of the term religion is problematic when speaking of African traditional religions if one approaches the topic without questioning assumptions about what religion is, means, and does. So, Professor Small basically echoing the sentiment of the racists. Because it's the racists that said that if you find any kind of sophisticated, systematic religion or theology, it didn't come from there because they don't have the capability. And so Dr. Smoke's kind of saying something similar here without even knowing it. And then he's like, "Well, we didn't have a religion; we had a way of life." Well, yeah, the religion was a way of life. And unfortunately, it seems as if Mr. Smalls is looking at Africa through Western eyes. Because outside of Africa, yeah, in America, we have what's known as the, church state separation. There is no such thing in Africa or in the ancient Near East, right? Religion was a part of everything that you did, so but he should know that. Like he spent many times in Africa. So for him to say there's no religion, it's just a way of life. It's almost like he's playing semantics here, Jack. What do you think, MJ?
Yeah, he's just wrong. And he's, you hate Christianity so much that you'll start obscuring the data. So what I have in my hand, what I'm gonna read to you, is just what a real scholar, and I hate to come off disrespectful, but I mean, I'm sorry. John MBT is the man, as far as I'm concerned. He's an actual African, and he's a scholar of African religions. And what he says is in chapter number 2 of Introduction to African Religion, he wrote a book on it. He asked, "What is African religion?" And he goes on to say that African religions are comprised of at least 5 elements, right? Beliefs. Okay, these are a central part of any religion. They show the way people think about the universe, their attitude towards life itself. Practices, ceremonies, and festivals. Are these unique to the indigenous people of Africa? Yes, they have practices, ceremonies, and festivals. This group of activities is also essential to any religion. Religious practices show how people express their belief in practical terms. What about religious objects and places? This is element number 3. This part of religion covers the things and places which people have set apart as being holy or sacred. How about values and morals, right? You talking about a way of life. Well, values and morals are a way of life. This part of religion deals with the ideas that safeguard or uphold life, the life of the people in their relationship with one another and the world around them. What about religious leaders? These are the people who conduct religious matters such as ceremonies, sacrifices, formal prayers, and divinations. We would call them priests. And
And
isn't he
it's
a
funny enough,
priest?
he is, yes,
Ah, he's
For the Ifa tradition, yes.
religious and don't even know it.
I mean, I guess he wouldn't call it religion. I guess he would call it a way of life. But again, we're
Tomato,
playing
tomato.
right. We're playing semantics here. We're playing
Yeah.
semantics. So, but let's continue. Let's go to let me see here. All right, I need you to go to the 13-minute 29-second mark. Shout out to Miss Titus 2 in the building. What's going on, sis?
All right. Oh,
And
my
that you
bad.
can
You said
live based.
13, didn't you? My fault.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right.
All right.
I want them to see where they are. I think that when Constantine and the people around him at the Council of the Nicene Council, then the Council of Trent, then the Chalcedonian Council, they started this thing in 325, and 700, they were still trying to perfect this thing called the Bible. It took them nearly 400 years to do it. And it took them 400 years to do what? To translate Egyptian sacred science literature, the Book of the Coming Forth by Day, the pyramid text, the coffin text, and other sacred texts that was describing cosmology and ecology. Let me show you. And it took them like 400 years to come up with the document we call the Bible. They started in 325, but they didn't finish in 325. That's the Council of Nicaea. Then you had 2 councils of Trent, and these councils are lasting for years, right?
I wish you knew how to share your screen, Professor.
Now you can stop it.
You got some sources, Professor?
You can stop it. So
Oh, share your screen.
he's claiming that the Bible was written between the Council of Nicaea and the Council of Trent.
Lord have mercy.
So there was no scriptures until then. And the reason it took so long was because they were jacking the cosmology of ancient Egypt, right? Now, if that's true, the copyists of the New Testament did a horrible job at copying the cosmology. Why do I say that? Well, and I've shared this before, but I'm going to do it real quick. So you have the Heliopolitan theology in ancient Kemet, right? Because there was various theologies there. So in their cosmology, the Heliopolitan theology, Nun, the pre-existent primeval ocean, came into being by himself. And one of the Egyptian cosmogonic speculations, Atum, who arose out of the pre-existent Nun, threatened that the land will return into Nun, into the floodwaters, and as in its first state. Thus, it is to be noted that in Heliopolitan cosmonic mythology, the watery chaos or waste was pre-existent and was personified as Nun, the mother of gods, or she who bears Re, the sun god, identified with Autumn each day. Sounds just like Genesis 1, right? Just like it. What about the Memphite theology? All right, let's look at that. In the rival Memphite theology, Ptah, the chief god of Memphis, is equated with Nun and is the creative principle itself out of which Atum and all other gods were created. So Ptah is both Nun, the primeval ocean, and Tatinin, the primeval land, which arose out of Nun and is equated with the land of Egypt. Again, I I don't know if that's Genesis 1, Genesis 2, MJ. I don't recall these things being said here, right?
Well, no. Well, I'm gonna stay in the same vein that you, but I just want to point out for the audience that Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen said that they took care of some business at the Council of Jamnia, which is before the Council of Nicaea. So he's contradicting Dr. Ben.
Right. One
Just by
one
the way,
OG is contradicting the other OG.
get your story right,
This is
Hoteps.
your king. This is your king. How about Hermopolitan cosmogony, right? There existed prior to creation a infinite, dark, watery chaos whose characteristics are incorporated into the four pairs of gods of the Ogadoad. As the water begins to stir, the primeval hillock emerges from the deep, bringing up the cosmic egg out of which Re, the sun god, will appear to proceed with the creation of all other things. The new creative events occur in cyclical fashion with the daily rebirth of the sun and the annual receding of the Nile. Don't recall seeing any of this in the Genesis account. Now, this is from Nahum M. Sarnar, Creation from Genesis. The traditional English translation reads, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." This rendering construes the verse as an independent sentence, complete in itself, a solemn declaration that serves as an epitomizing caption to the entire narrative. It takes the initial word Bereshit to mean at the beginning of time, and thus makes a momentous assertion about the nature of God, that he is wholly outside of time, just as he is outside of space, both of which he proceeds to create. In other words, the first time in the religious history of the Near East, God is conceived as being entirely free of temporal and spatial dimensions. We don't see this in these other cosmologies. The decisive differences between Egyptian cosmogonies and Genesis creation, so that one can really no longer say that the Egyptian view of creation was very similar to that of Israel. Genesis 1 does not know the threat of the created world's return to a chaotic state as is expressed in the Heliopolitan cosmogony. It does not know the cyclical nature of creative events. The creative events occur in linear succession, dated by days which end with the seventh day. This linear view, which inaugurates history, is opposed to the mythical concept of a primordial event which is constantly repeated in the present. This is from The Polemic Nature of Genesis Cosmology by Gerald A. Hassel, page 84. But this Professor Smalls is saying that it took the Christian writers 400 years to steal these cosmologies and place them in our Bible. Well, I'm reading their cosmologies. Where is this in our Bible?
Yeah.
Where is it? I mean, it's not here, right? The idea of Tehom in Genesis 1 2 does not have features reminiscent of the Hermopolitan cosmogony. No God rises out of Tehom to proceed with creation, nor is Tehom a pre existent personified ocean as none in Heliopolitan theology. The
Mm.
concept of Tehom in Genesis 1 is devoid of any kind of mythical quality or connotation. With T.H. Gaster, it is to be observed that Genesis 1, verse 2, quote, nowhere implies that all things actually issued out of water. You don't find any of this in our creation account.
None.
So where is he getting this idea that it took us 400 years? I don't understand. It's not there. Because if this is what they were trying to do, they failed. Because none of this shows up in the New Testament writings or in the Old Testament writings at all.
Yeah, and according to Dr. Ben, you're off by a couple of hundred years.
Right.
Just saying. He's a pseudo too, but you pseudos can't even agree amongst yourselves.
Right. And so this whole dating process, right? That there was no Bible until the Council of Nicaea. MJ, if you could be so kind to read this right here for us.
Absolutely. You're going to learn today. The Moratorium fragment is the oldest known list of New Testament books. It was discovered by Ludovico Antonio Moratori in a manuscript in the Ambrosian Library in Milan, and published by him in 1740. It is called the fragment because the beginning of it is missing, although the manuscript in which it appears was copied during the 7th century. The list itself is dated to about 170 because its author refers to the episcopate of Pius the first of Rome. He died in 157. This is
So,
about, go ahead.
right. So, MJ, when was the Council of Nicaea again?
325.
And this list of New Testament letters, books were dated to when?
170.
170. I think we have a problem.
But I mean, he has a major problem because you got church fathers like quoting you got church fathers quoting the gospels, you got church fathers quoting all kinds of stuff in the gospels that they quote also quote the Old Testament and things like that. Furthermore, I mean, you got Papias, who says that Mark wrote down the memoirs of Peter, so Peter's an actual person. Matthew wrote Matthew. You just got all kinds of evidence that these dudes don't even sniff at.
And it's not like it's not readily available. Like, you can find any decent book on the Council of Nicaea to know exactly what happened. Because people who were there wrote about it.
Mm-hmm.
Eusebius and all the other, they talk. Now, there is some discrepancies about how many people. Some would say 150, 200. But there's a list. There's an actual list of the people who were there. Saint Nicholas, the one that we get Santa Claus from, he's there. He's on the ledger. His name is written on the ledger.
Mm.
We know what happened. We have the canons, the decree that they came uh and voted for at that council. We have the canons. We have them. There's no guesswork here. You know what I mean? There's just not. So for them to insist and telling these things that are completely just not true. And at this point, you should know. You should know. So
And
anyway, yeah,
Sonetta said, "I wish I could see your screen."
we all wish we could see his screen.
Well, I mean, so
I
he
would
could
love to know, right?
so he could put his garbage on some slides and see I got slides. It's
Because I would
still
love to see. Because I don't know where honestly, I really don't know where his sources come from. It took 400 years to make the Bible between this council and the Council of Trent. Where are you getting that from?
he ain't quoting Dr. Ben.
Well, he's getting it from somewhere. Either he's getting it from somewhere, or he's literally making it up as it's going on. I don't know.
I think he's making it up.
But anyway, hey. Either way, he's wrong.
Yes, sir.
Either way, he's wrong. So, all right. So let's go now to the 15-minute, 26-second mark.
15, 20 what?
26.
26. All right. Let's get this in. He looked like he in his bag, too.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
And so in some stories, they talk about a brother named Arius, who's at the Council of Nicaea, who have a split, right? He leaves and go back to Egypt from Rome, and they hunt him down trying to kill him. But it is out of his teaching that arises the Coptic Church, right? Now, the Coptic Church says that Jesus only have one beingness, that of being spiritual. The Christian church says he's both spiritual and human. That's what the argument is, right? That he has a spiritual nature and he has a divine nature. The African says no, he only has a divine nature. God only have a divine nature. He doesn't have a human nature. And so that's what that split is. The Coptic Church still exists to today. Now, some people have said, I said Jesus was real. This thing they're talking about in the Bible
All right,
about
Uh-oh,
you
Jesus.
stop
uh-oh,
there.
you stumbled in the
Say again.
You stop there.
I'm sorry. That's the
So,
best,
so,
man. Oh,
so,
Jesus.
first of all, he's talking about Arius, who basically started the Coptic Church, right? So, let's look at the early Coptic papacy, the Egyptian church, and its leadership in late antiquity by Stephen J. Davis. As an aside, Eusebius, concerned with establishing apostolic chronology, is also evident in his work entitled The Chronicle, in which he places Mark's arrival in Alexandria in the third year of Claudius' reign, or AD 43. The dating of Mark's arrival would become a contested issue in the history of the Egyptian church. Different sources from the early medieval church present dates that range from AD 39 to the year 49 or 50. The official medieval church history of the Copts, the history of the patriarchs, eventually dated his arrival in the 15th year after the ascension of Christ, AD 48. So there's a little discrepancy here, right? 43, some say 49. They've come to agreement. The official date now is AD 48, right? All right. Arius, he was believed to have been born in 256 in Ptolemais, Casinica, Roman Empire. Coptic Church, AD 48. This dude's born 256. So unless he's Kang the Conqueror, he was not there to start the Coptic Church. So I'm just saying. But anyway, let's continue. There's more, right? So now he talks about the issue that these two churches had when it comes to the nature of Christ, right? And it's a little bit more nuanced than what Professor Smalls alludes to, right? So what I want to do here is read a transcript from Seth Price, who interviewed Dr. Vince Bantu. It's called A Cultural Look at the Church with Dr. Vince Bantu, February 17th, 2020. He goes into the contention, okay? So starts off with, okay, well, let's say that he's one person. He's one Jesus. He's one hypostasis, but he has two natures. He has two phases, a human and divine one. And a lot of other churches in Arabia and Asia and Africa, that didn't make sense to them. They were like, that sounds like you're saying there's two different Jesuses. Now, that's not what the Roman Church was saying, and what Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox, later Protestant Christians, have just kind of maybe just not really thought through that and just kind of imbibed that. And so that's why a lot of these early Christians will just get written off by a lot of Western Protestants. Even reading churches through textbooks written by evangelicals will just write them off and say, well, the church at that time was trying to really strike a middle ground, and everyone was on two extremes, and the Western church had the right answer in the middle. And I'm just like, that's crap. Most people who have that kind of opinion haven't read Timothy Leary of Egypt against Chalcedon, or haven't read the theology of Jacob of Serug in the Syriac or philosophers of M to really understand what they were saying. And they were still just kind of, without even knowing how to read that stuff in Syriac or in Coptic, they just rejected it as heretical and say, well, the problem with them is that they didn't really believe Jesus was really human. They just thought he was God. That is the opposite of the truth. These believers believe fully in the full humanity and the full divinity of Jesus Christ, who is part of the triune of God. They just reject the language specifically of saying that he's one person in two natures. As perhaps trivial as this argument might seem to a lot of us today, this led to bloodshed for 200 years and the Roman Church is going into churches. So this is like Christian on Christian violence and oppression and colonialism going in Africa and going into Asia for 200 years and trying to force their particular theology. So it wasn't that the African churches did not believe in the divine and human nature. They did. They did. They just didn't like the way they presented it. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That was the issue. And unfortunately, Professor Small falls into the same trap as many others have throughout the years of just writing the African church off by saying, well, they didn't believe it at all. They completely disagreed with the other churches. No, they didn't. They disagreed with how the language was placed to explain that concept. And as a professor, you would think that he would be very much into the nuance of certain arguments, but he kind of just like what Dr. Bantu says, writes them off. So I mean, it's a little problematic here. I mean, what's your thoughts, MJ?
Once again, he's making stuff up, and starting to see a little trend here.
Mm-mm.
But I mean, even at the Council of Nicaea, Dr. Smalls, excuse me, Professor Smalls, I'm gonna be nice, completely platonizes the existence of Jesus, ignoring who the major players at the Council of Nicaea was, which was Alexander, who was the bishop, and all Athanasius, and of course Arius. And if you want to know if one of these guys know what they're talking about, ask them who was at the Council of Nicaea besides Arius, and they won't be able to tell you.
Well, according to Mr. Smalls, he'll tell you that some Kemetic priests were at the council. I don't know
And,
what, again, where he's getting that, I don't know, but he said that.
and this is historical revisionism. Now, I asked you, will we allow, like, look, when certain folks down here in Texas write textbooks saying that Africans came over here as immigrants, as refugees, uh, looking for work, like we would have a fit, like we cry foul. But these dudes feel that they can go in and just revise history because they don't like it. No, you don't get to revise history because you don't like it. I mean, like, stop being pseudo, man. Like, if it's pseudo for the textbooks writer, for the lost cause, mythology and stuff, if that's pseudo, like, you got to stop and be consistent, man. It's not a good look for our community, especially if you call yourself a professor.
No, it's bad. It's bad. And Byron, yeah, I mean, it's two different issues. Absolutely. He conflates both of them because I guess it makes it bolsters his argument in his mind to do so. So yeah, right. He do know. I think he's betting that we don't know, sis. I think for a lot of these guys, they're betting on the believer not knowing that there are primary sources. So you know what I mean. So yeah, but let's continue. The next clip, Mr. Jackson, if you could be so kind, will be the 17-minute 27-second mark, please.
One of the few
This guy's
no
hey, hold on,
historian
hold on, hold on, hold
mentions
on,
of
hold on.
Jesus anywhere.
This guy's hilarious. I'm too handsome for this screen. Very funny, guys. Ha ha. Oh man, but yeah, go ahead, bro. Go for it.
I'm gonna rewind it back for a second. All right.
One of the few no historian mentions of Jesus anywhere. And they had some good historians back then. One of them was the guy named Flavius Josephus. He doesn't mention Jesus. He covers that whole time period. The other is Pliny the Younger. He doesn't mention a Jesus. He covers that time period. Then there's Pliny the Elder. He doesn't mention Jesus. There's no historian during that period of the Roman occupation of Northeast Africa that anybody named Jesus is mentioned. There are some men who are resisting and who are rebels, and the Roman captured most of them and killed them. Okay? The thing we see the cross today, they didn't use that. They stretched people on trees. Yeah, they nailed that arm on there, but it was on a tree. It was not something they stuck in the ground like we see in
All
the
right, you can stop
movies
it
and
there.
the three cross. Look,
So no historian, MJ, has ever
Yeah,
written about Jesus. None.
he no none.
None.
Not now.
Not
Not
Josephus, not Pliny the Younger, right?
not
So
not now scholar. I'm
not
gonna say how you
Nan.
said down here. Not another not a now another scholar mentions Jesus.
But let's I mean, he mentions Pliny, and Pliny does mention, which is funny, right? Because he does mention him, but he says he doesn't. But he does. But let's stick with Josephus though, right? Let's
He
go with
said it.
Josephus.
He said it.
So the standard text for Josephus reads as follows: About this time lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man, for he was the achiever of extraordinary deeds and was the teacher of those who accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah. When he was indicted by the principal men among us and Pilate condemned him to be crucified, those who had come to love him originally did not cease to do so, for he appeared to them on the third day restored to life, as the prophets of the deity had foretold these and countless other marvelous things about him. And the tribe of the Christians, so named after him, has not disappeared to this day. Now, and Shawnee, big up to Shawnee, bodega lady in the building, she did bring up that there's been an interpolation that we find in this text, right? So, although this passage is so worded in the Josephus manuscripts as early as the third century church historian Eusebius, scholars have long suspected a Christian interpolation, since Josephus could hardly have believed Jesus to be the Messiah or in his resurrection and have remained as he did a non-Christian Jew. In 1972, however, Professor Shlomo Pines of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem announced his discovery of a different manuscript tradition of Josephus writing in the 10th century. All right. So here's that manuscript without the Christian interpolation. At this time, there was a wise man called Jesus, and his conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous. Many people among the Jews and the other nations became his disciples. Pilate condemned him to be crucified and to die. But those who had become his disciples did not abandon his discipleship. They reported that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion and that he was alive. Accordingly, he was perhaps the Messiah, concerning whom the prophets had reported wonders. And the tribe of the Christians, so named after him, has not disappeared to this day. Here clearly is language that a Jew could have written without conversion to Christianity. This is from Shlomo Pines, an Arabic version of the Testimonium Flavinum and its implications. This is from Jerusalem, Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities. So, yeah, there was an interpolation, but we have manuscripts that don't have the interpolation. It says here Josephus must have mentioned Jesus in authentic core material at 1863, since this passage is present in all Greek manuscripts of Josephus, and the Agapian version accords well with his grammar and vocabulary elsewhere. Moreover, Jesus was portrayed as a quote wise man, a phrase not used by Christians, but employed by Josephus for such personalities as David and Solomon in the Hebrew Bible. And also, right, this is an extremely important passage since it has so many stunning parallels to what took place on Good Friday, and yet it seems to be largely ignored in revisionist New Testament scholarship. It tells us of the death of Jesus' half brother, James the Just of Jerusalem, under the high priest Ananus, son of the former high priest Annas, and brother in law to Caiaphas, both well known from the Gospels. Josephus' text reads as follows. I won't go into that, but even with the interpolation, let's say we didn't find a manuscript that did not have the interpolation, we still have another portion from Josephus explaining Jesus, James being arrested, half brother of Jesus. There's no interpolation, so he's talking about Jesus there too. So what is Professor Smalls talking about? What is he talking about? All right, so yeah, so we're gonna yeah. Oh yeah. So wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute. All right. So he talked about Pliny, right? Pliny
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mention. Pliny don't mention him, right? Okay. Book 10, letter 96 to the Emperor Trajan, right? This is it. They affirm, however, the whole of their guilt or their error was that they were in the habit of meeting on a certain fixed day before it was light, when they sang in alternate verses a hymn to Christ as to a God. So I guess what the professor means that he didn't say the actual word Jesus, but who's known as the Christ at that time? Who
Mm-hmm.
else? Because remember, he's trying to figure out what he should do with these Christians. He's seeking advice from the emperor. So he's talking about Christians. So even if there was another group that happened to have a leader that also had the title Christ, that's not who he's talking about. He's talking about this group
But just the
called
point,
Christians.
just the point on what you just said. If
Uh
there
huh.
was, another so-called Messiah, like the trend with failed messiahs was to abandon them,
Right.
right? It was a failed movement. But Jesus, his death was not perceived as a failure, and so the movement kept going. And in other words, it was counter to the trend of this person is going to liberate us. Well, they wind up getting crucified. Everybody go about their business. But no, people kept following Jesus, and this correlates with what you find in the non-New Testament early Christian ancient sources, from Clement, from the Didache, all kinds of sources outside of the New Testament. And so these non-Christian sources are correlating with the other ancient Christian non-New Testament sources. So I would just have to say that, I mean, maybe it's time for for Mr. Smalls to retire, because he's just out of touch with the scholarship on this.
And again, guys, I'm not a scholar. Okay, I don't got a college degree. I have a couple. I have a few college credits and a high school diploma. If I can figure it out, so can the good professor. Okay, so is and this is their king. This is one of their kings. This is OG, triple OG, master teacher. Okay, remember that. So, Mr. Jackson, if you could be so kind, uh, can you go to 19? Oh, this is where you think it's crazy now. It's about to get lit. Okay.
He about to pseudo it up, baby.
He's gonna give this guy, what's his name? Young Pharaoh, a run for his money right now. Watch this.
Okay,
19 minute 35-second mark.
all right, 1935.
Yep.
All right, let me make this thing big screen.
Well, he doesn't get arrested first. There's a big problem. Some people get arrested, but Jesus escapes, right? Goes to the Garden of Gethsemane with his boys. It's clear that they went to fight, because when the soldiers come, his main man, Peter, pulls his sword out and chops the Romans' ears off. That doesn't sound like peace and love to me. That's what the Bible says now. So what's my man doing with a sword unless they're out to fight, right? This is taking their document And then something happens. Jesus' main man, a guy named Judas Issachar, the Christian church tried to make it look like that was always an antagonist. No, it was Jesus's revolutionary movement, meaning it was Judah revolutionary movement that Jesus was trying to join. Judah was the militant. He was the revolutionary. But Jesus was his ace goon spoon, his main man. Jesus got a problem. Some people got captured that day. But Jesus didn't get captured because he escaped to this garden with his boys, with the swords, right? Who got captured? A cat named Barabbas, right? Now they tell us in the church Barabbas was a thief and a murderer. But they don't translate. Tell the Hebrew brothers translate it for you. Bar, son of, Rabbas, Lord. Barabbas is Jesus' son. Jesus and Mary Magdalene's son. Barabbas is the son of the Lord. So the son of the, according to their literature now,
Right.
the son of the Lord gets captured. And I know what Mary said, the same thing my wife said to me when my son Agnatin went to jail way back in the day. You better go get my damn boy out of there. And she meant it. She told me, get out, go find a Lord, wherever you better get my son out of jail. And I'm
You can
sure
stop
Mary
that.
told Jesus the same thing, if according to their
Okay, there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
Somebody said, Negro what? Oh Jesus.
So
Oh my
I mean,
goodness.
let's start small. No pun intended. Let's start
Mm-mm-mm.
small and let's work our way up. So he made it seem as if Jesus wanted Peter to cut this dude's ear off, right? Well, let's see if that's the case, right? Matthew 26. In fact, since this is your namesake, you read this, bro.
Okay. Matthew 26:47 through 52. While he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Seize him." And he came up to Jesus at once and said, "Greetings, Rabbi." And he kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you came to do." Then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew a sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword."
So was Jesus really happy with Peter here?
Negative.
Right, but Professor Small makes it seem as if he was rocking with this.
Negative.
You know what I mean?
And I don't think Judas was his boy either.
And when did Judas have his own revolutionary movement? When
Looks
did
like
that happen?
I, I don't know when that happened, but I mean, he
So
looked like he's
so Judas had a side gig while he was being one of the apostles. He also had like this fringe Hebrew revolutionary group that somehow Jesus ends up wanting to be a part of.
maybe Professor Smalls got Judas confused with some of the other zealots that were a part of Jesus' crew.
But
But
even with, and he did have zealots.
yeah,
But did the zealots do anything with
nah,
their swords? No.
negative.
Right. So it's still, even trying to be charitable, it's just not gonna happen.
No,
So
no.
and then he says
Mm.
that Barabbas is the son of Jesus and Mary. And look at Sarnetta's face when he says this. Look at Sa's face. He's like,
He's like,
what?
this is some new pseudo stuff.
Even Sa's like, wait a minute, Professor.
You taking it to the emptieth power, Professor. Oh
So
my God.
so right. So I'm like, wait, and people in the chat is like, wait, when they heard this, like, wait, what's going on?
Oh,
So okay, I like. All right, Shadi said here. there's a school of thought that Judas was called Iscariot because he was a Sakari. Well, in the text, we know that we don't know. It doesn't say that. Now there was a group called the Sakari. They had daggers and they were definitely revolutionaries. Like that's true.
Yeah.
But let's say that's true, right? Let's go with that school of thought. He also says that Jesus joined the Sakari,
Mm-mm.
and I'm not sure what the chronologic the timeline is for the Sakari. Like, were they around the first century? I'm not sure. But man, this is a lot. Look at Sa's face.
He was like,
Look at his face.
this is some new pseudo stuff that I've never heard. Interesting.
It's like young Pharaoh, man, hold my beer. I'm gonna show you what pseudo is. I'm gonna show you how it's done, youngin. So,
He's gonna save the channel.
so I'm trying to think, right? Again, where could the professor be getting this from? And it's like there's two things that maybe he's drawing from, maybe. And one of those things is, let me see here. Da, yeah, it's says here Ariel Sabar, writing for the Atlantic, has presented clear and convincing evidence that the so-called Gospel of Jesus' wife is a forgery. Dr. Karen King unveiled the fragment in 2012 and suggested that the Coptic text came from a fourth century copy of an otherwise unknown second century gospel. The clause that gave the fragment its name was found in the fourth line, which reads, quote, Jesus said to them, my wife. Sabar's careful investigation of the fragment's origins reinforced arguments presented earlier by scholars such as Andrew Bernhard and Francis Watson that the text on the scrap of papyrus was a forgery. Now, even King has admitted that the fragment is probably fake, though she has seen no need to retract her earlier paper. So they found this fragment that supposedly showed that Jesus had a wife. Come to find out, it was a fragment, and even the person who showed the fragment now also believes it was also a forgery. So you got that right. Then you have this the lost gospel. The reader should know that Jacob Vissy and Wilson have certainly not discovered a lost gospel in any normal sense of the term. We know about many gospels that did not make it into our New Testament canon. Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Peter, Gospel of Mary. But this newly discovered text is not one of them. On the contrary, the authors based their claim on a Syriac manuscript dated to the 6th century AD that contains a pseudepigraphical story entitled Joseph and Asenath. The story has been well known to scholars for years. The story of Joseph and Asenath has nothing to do with Jesus and Mary. It does not even mention Jesus and Mary. The authors are forced to argue that the story must be read allegorically, where Joseph equals Jesus and Asenath equals Mary, in order to reach their conclusions. Needless to say, this is highly speculative and subjective. Yes, it's definitely zeitgeist vibes. Definitely. So that's the only thing I could think of what he might be using as a source. But these sources are Fugazi, both of them, both of them. So I don't know what to tell you. Is this your king? Really? Barabbas is the son of Jesus. Really? And never tells us where he's getting the stuff. He just says it and be like, "Hey, I'm old, so therefore it must be true." I guess I don't know. I I'm at a loss here. I mean, and unfortunately, Mr. Smalls, like I said, he's one of the OGs. He's one of the guys that people look up to gain information from. it's just bad. MJ, your thoughts, man?
Well, I think he should. I think it's time to retire. And hopefully we did our part in you know showing that the information is pseudo. I mean, it is. I mean, there is no sources for any of this stuff. And at best, what you just showed was the sources are discredited. But he's made a whole bunch of claims, such as no historian mentions Jesus. That's false. No professional historian would say that. I mean, that's just god awful. Um, I'm glad. Shout out to Shadi. I'm glad that we were able to do this series. And there's quite a few more, right?
Yep, yep,
You still got John G. Jackson, and
yep.
I like John G. Jackson. He tries. His information is outdated too, but he's citing sources. Um, you got Browder. Your Browder's gonna get. I still get comments on my Anthony Browder video of people calling me coon, of people mad at me, for for challenging stuff like that. Look, I'm not talking to the Christian audience on here, but I'm talking to whoever might watch this. Like, look, we have to move beyond going with certain people because we like what they're saying and begin to engage this stuff critically. Look, I am a Christian because it's true.
Right.
Right? It can be substantiated, it can be defended. It's true. And if you can challenge me on it, I don't have a problem answering, but it's true. And it can withstand scrutiny.
Yep. Yep. Oh, and we're also gonna deal with the triple OG Ashworth Quasi. Man, stuff. But listen, there's some stuff there, boy. Woo!
He's taking folks to the lodge for real.
For years, for years. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're getting ahead of ourselves. So I mean, so that's it. I mean, there's just so much stuff that the good professor says that's just not true. Just not true. And we don't want the reason why we're taking the time to do these things because people still quote from people like Professor Smalls. People actually get their biblical worldview shaken by people like Professor Smalls. So what me and MJ want to do is just reaffirm and show you that there's no need for your faith to be shaken here. There's nothing here. You know. So there's just
I got a
nothing here.
I got a book by Rashango I'm looking at right over by my window.
Yeah, we're gonna get him. We're gonna revisit Polite. You know, we might have to holler at SETI real quick again. You know, all these dudes that everybody likes to chop up their lectures and put them on their TikTok videos, and you know, yeah, we gotta deal with all them dudes, all of
Yeah, in the words of my homie from Miami down there in Florida, they're about to get touched.
them. For real, for real, for real, for real,
They about
for
to
real.
get touched, B. They about to get touched.
So, but yeah, man. So we're gonna wrap it up, man. And yeah, he says here, what he said? He said he needs some MJ corrective love. Yeah.
We about to reach out and touch him.
Oh man. So yeah, man. So with that being said, man, we're gonna sign off. We'll be coming back soon with the next installment of Is This Your King? So MJ and BK, we out. Peace.